2 days before Christmas, I, Michelle, 58 years old, living in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, woke up early and went straight to the local farmer's market. I picked the freshest vegetables, bought an organic chicken, and a few sprigs of rosemary to make lemon herb roasted chicken, my daughter Sophie's favorite dish. Soon, the whole house was filled with the warm aroma of garlic and roasted thyme. My heart brimmed with anticipation. I spread the tablecloth, arranged the candles, fluffed the cushions, then sat on the sofa as eager as a child waiting for Santa Claus. Sophie had just finished her first year working after graduating from the University of California. Yesterday, she told me she had to work until December 23rd to impress her boss. I'd always been proud of how hardworking she was. A little after 7 p.m., the front door opened. I jumped up, smiling wide, arms open, ready to hug my daughter. But she didn't even look at me. Sophie ran straight into the arms of her father, Richard, my ex-husband, practically leaping into them. "Dad, I got a $5,000 year-end bonus this year." Richard's face lit up like a Christmas tree. He gently patted her head. "My girl, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you." Right then, Henry and Martha, Richard's parents, stepped in, their faces glowing. "Sophie, you're the pride of this whole family," Martha exclaimed with excitement. I stood off to the side, watching them gather around her. Of course I was happy for her, but there was a heavy emptiness inside me, as if I'd been forgotten. After all, I was the one who raised her. I walked over, gently took her hand. "Long day, honey? Are you hungry? I made your favorite dish. If you'd like, I can warm it up again." Sophie didn't even look at me. "Mom, could you stop asking such pointless questions?" she snapped. Then she unzipped her suitcase, her face glowing as she pulled out a neat stack of red envelopes, placing them on the coffee table as if she were about to announce the Oscars. Just then, Ethan, Richard's younger brother, and his wife Lisa walked in. "Wow, Sophie, you look so successful," Ethan said, eyes wide. "Are those gifts for everyone? That's so thoughtful." Lisa rushed over to hug Sophie. "Sweetheart, I missed you so much." I stood frozen. At that moment, I realized my daughter could consider anyone her family, except her own mother. As everyone gathered around the table, Sophie beamed. "To thank everyone for supporting me this year, I got a gift for each of you. Dad, here's a $5,000 Visa card. Grandma and Grandpa, each of you gets a $300 spa voucher. Aunt Lisa and Uncle Ethan, here are $200 Whole Foods cards." I said nothing, just stood watching as she handed out the gifts with pride. Lisa nudged Sophie playfully and whispered, "Sweetheart, I think you forgot someone." Sophie laughed, tapping her forehead. "Oh my gosh, you're right. There's one more in my bag." A flicker of relief passed through me. So, she did remember her mother. Maybe she'd saved mine for last, something special. I held out my hand, waiting. But Sophie bent down, picked up Luna, our little dog, and tucked the final envelope into the dog's sweater. "This one's for Luna because she's been the best girl this year." I stood there, motionless. My smile froze. My hand hung mid-air. Useless. After a long silence, I finally asked softly, "Sophie, what about me?" She turned, her voice light but sharp. "Mom, you stay home all day. You don't work, you have no idea how hard my job is. You cook and clean, that's your choice. You don't help me with anything important. So why should I get you a gift?" Lisa quickly pulled her to sit down, whispering, "That's enough, honey." But Sophie went on, smiling. "Oh, and guess what? I booked tickets for the whole family to Hawaii for New Year's. We fly out tomorrow night." I stayed quiet, thinking, it's okay. I don't need a gift as long as I get to go with her. Maybe that was her way of showing affection. I looked through the envelopes with everyone, searching for mine, but there wasn't one. I turned to her, confused. Sophie lifted her chin, Mom, you're not going anywhere. I need you to stay home and watch Luna. She'll get lonely if she's by herself. You're perfect for that. In that moment, something inside me shattered. To my own daughter, I wasn't worth as much as a plane ticket. Anger surged through me. I swept my arm across the counter. The tray of cookies I'd just baked crashed to the floor, breaking apart. The sound rang out like a fire alarm. Martha screamed, "Michelle, have you lost your mind?" Henry frowned. "You just ruined everyone's Christmas Eve. What are you trying to do here?" Martha turned to Richard and muttered, "Marrying a woman like that was a mistake from the start. Next year, when I get my bonus again, I'll take you. But now, look, you've ruined the evening for everyone. Are you happy?" Ethan started to speak, but Lisa gently grabbed his hand and shook her head. I laughed, a dry, bitter laugh. "So that's what it takes? I have to break something for anyone to remember I still exist?" Richard's face darkened. His voice dropped low, heavy with irritation. "Do you have any idea how ridiculous you look right now, Michelle? This was supposed to be a joyful family gathering, and you had to ruin it for everyone. If you can't handle it, then leave. No one's stopping you." His voice was cold as steel. That sentence echoed in my head, me, Michelle, 58 years old, living in Portland, Oregon. How ironic I hadn't really been part of this family for years. I was just the unpaid housekeeper, the dog sitter, the cook, the invisible one. I yanked off my apron, threw it aside, and stormed into the bedroom. I stuffed my clothes into a travel bag, grabbed my wallet and papers. As I turned toward the door, Lisa, my sister-in-law, ran over and grabbed my hand. "Michelle, don't do this. It's already dark out. Where are you planning to go?" She turned back and called, "Sophie, say something. Don't let your mom just walk out like this." But Sophie, my 27-year-old daughter, didn't move. She leaned back on the sofa, half asleep, lips curled in disdain. Just let her go. What's she gonna do? Run back to Grandma's house? She always overreacts. She'll be back tomorrow, just like every other time. I froze. 20 years of love, care, and sacrifice reduced to a single sentence, sharp as a blade. If my mother had heard how they spoke to me that night, it would have broken her heart. I gently pulled my hand from Lisa's, said nothing, and walked out of the house. The late December wind whipped against my face. I took out my phone and dialed my mother. "Mom," I said, voice calm but hollow. "I'm not coming home for the holidays. I need some time for myself. Maybe I'll go away for a bit." My mother, Helen, stayed silent for a few seconds before replying softly, "That's a good idea, sweetheart. A change of scenery will do you good. Just be careful, okay?" A moment later, she added, "Remember I told you I was selling the old house in Seattle? It's done. I'll send you some." She knew something was wrong but didn't ask, didn't press. She just quietly supported me, the way she always had. I answered gently, "I'm okay, Mom. I don't need anything right now. But thank you. If I ever do, I'll let you know. Thank you for always being there." I could almost hear her nod through the phone. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a bank alert. $50,000 transferred in, with a message, "To my beloved daughter, enjoy. Having a mother who stands beside you is a blessing, because she'll give you the courage to walk away from what's unworthy." That night, I checked into a small hotel downtown. For the first time in a long while, I lay on a bed that truly felt like my own, and slept in peace. The next morning, I sipped coffee by the window, watching the fog drift over the Willamette River, when my phone rang. It was Richard. I hesitated, then answered. His voice was low but full of anger. "Michelle, how long are you planning to keep up this childish act? Come home right now. I stopped by your mother's place. She said you weren't there. I don't care where you are, just get back. I didn't say a word. I just hung up. Who did he think I was? Some kind of servant who'd come running at the snap of his fingers. How shameless, still speaking to me as if he had any authority over my life. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a flood of messages from Sophie. Mom, don't you think you're too old for these childish games? Disappearing just to get attention? How immature. We're all flying to Hawaii tonight. If you don't come back, who's going to take care of Luna? If anything happens to her, I'll never forgive you. I stared at the screen. A bitter smile crept across my lips. That was my daughter, the one I had loved with all my heart, the one I had raised with my own hands, and now she spoke to me like this. Once, I saw her as my treasure. Now, she saw me as a burden, a free housekeeper. Tears welled up, but this time, I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall and swore it would be the last time I cried for them. I remembered Sophie as a little girl, sweet, tender, always wrapping her arms around my neck and whispering, "Mom, you're the best mom in the world. When I grow up, I'll buy you the prettiest dress." I could still recall the scent of soap in her hair, the sound of her bright laughter, but after middle school, things began to change. Her grades slipped, and Richard insisted she needed me home more, pushing me to quit my job. I obeyed, giving up my work as an accountant to become a full-time mother, believing I was doing the right thing. But as Sophie grew older, she grew colder. I still remembered the afternoon she came home angry, shouting, "Mom, stop showing up at school. Everyone knows you're just a housewife. It's embarrassing. You're useless. You don't make any money, and all you do is fight with Dad." Each time, I told myself, she's young. She'll understand someday. I waited through high school, then college, thinking that once she entered the real world, she'd see my sacrifices. But she never did. All I got in return were 20 years of silent, invisible sacrifice. And now, looking at the daughter I once loved most, I could hardly recognize her. That morning, New Year's Day, I got Sophie's final message. "Congratulations, Mom. You officially ruined everyone's plans. We're leaving at noon. Don't bother coming back. If you're not here when I return, don't bother calling yourself my mother." Perfect. Because I was just about ready to stop being hers. I opened my email and sent Richard the divorce papers I'd quietly prepared for months with one short line. "Sign them. If not, I'll file with the court." I turned off my phone, grabbed my suitcase, and headed straight to the airport. I didn't look back. And so, in the middle of winter, I boarded a flight to Iceland, the land of ice, wind, and silence, to begin the first real vacation of my life. When Richard received the divorce papers, panic hit him like a hammer. He started calling non-stop, but all he heard was the cold voice of voicemail. "The number you have dialed is not available." He paced the room, face tight with frustration. Meanwhile, Sophie, 27 years old, sat calmly in an armchair. She patted his shoulder and said firmly, "Dad, don't worry. This is just Mom's way of trying to make us feel guilty." Classic emotional manipulation. She's been a housewife for years. Do you really think she has the guts to go through with a divorce? Don't give in. Leave her alone. That's the only way she'll see who really has the power in this family. Richard's parents, sitting across the room, nodded in agreement. "She's been spoiled for too long," Martha muttered. "Divorce? Please," Henry scoffed. "She won't survive a week without my son." And so, the whole family grabbed their luggage and headed to the airport, starting their Hawaiian vacation as if nothing had happened. That night, Sophie posted a picture on Instagram inside a luxury hotel restaurant, champagne glass raised, smiling brightly under glittering lights. A perfect photo of a happy family holiday. I looked at that picture, then turned off my phone. Meanwhile, I, Michelle, was sitting with a few new friends, all of us bundled in thick coats, gathered around a small fire in the snow of Iceland. Snowflakes drifted softly. And above us, the northern lights danced like ribbons of emerald silk. We clinked our beer bottles together and laughed, no obligations, no roles to play, just freedom. A kind of freedom I had forgotten during 20 years of being a wife and mother. I smiled gently and whispered, "Youth is nice, but freedom is better." I took a few photos of the aurora and posted them on Instagram with the caption, "Like a dream. Life only happens once. Live it for yourself." Less than a minute later, I got a voice message from Sophie. Her voice was sharp, full of anger. "Money to travel alone? I've worked all year, saving every cent. Do you even think about this family? You're so selfish." I didn't listen to the whole thing, I just turned it off. But she was right about one thing: I was being selfish. And for the first time in my life, it felt good. I could finally breathe, live the way I wanted. I only wished I had done it sooner. I posted another photo, my plane ticket to Norway, with the caption, "Next stop, even brighter than before." That was the moment Sophie broke down. She started calling nonstop, leaving one frantic, angry message after another. "Why did you leave? Why are you wasting money? Why are you acting like a child?" I didn't respond. Eventually, I blocked her number. Furious, Sophie changed her ticket and flew home early. A 7-day trip cut down to 2. The next night, she burst into my mother's house in Seattle, crying in the middle of the living room. "Grandma, Mom is so selfish. She ran off abroad while the whole family was together. She cut me off, spent all the money Dad worked so hard for, and now she's blocked me too. You have to talk to her. Make her come to her senses." My mother, Helen, sat silently for a while, then lifted her head and spoke calmly. "Let me ask you something. When your whole family flew to Hawaii, did anyone ask your mother if she wanted to go?" Sophie froze, her mouth open, but no words coming out. Richard quickly jumped in, trying to smooth things over. "That's a misunderstanding. Michelle said she didn't want to go. She said she wanted to save money." My mother let out a soft, bitter laugh. "That's strange. You just accused her of being wasteful, and now you say she's trying to save. Which is it then? Let me make this clear. No one has the right to push my daughter around. She has me, and with my support, she'll never have to beg for anyone's pity again. She doesn't need a thing. From you, especially not your spare change." Then she stood, pointed toward the door, and said calmly, "Get out of my house." Richard and Sophie quietly walked out, stunned. In the car, with tension thick in the air, Richard frowned. "Wait. Your mom mentioned selling her old house. The way she talked today, it sounds like she actually sold it." Sophie's eyes widened, her voice trembling. "What? Grandma sold the house? Oh my God. That place is worth a fortune. No wonder Mom wants a divorce. She's planning to take the money and disappear. We can't let that happen. We have to get that money back." From that day on, Sophie changed. She was no longer the arrogant, self-assured girl I once knew. She started texting me constantly, checking in every day. "Mom, how are you? Are you enjoying your trip? Is it cold there? When are you coming home?" As if a few sweet words could erase everything she had ever said. She thought I would soften, just like always. But not this time. I didn't respond. Until one night, she sent a voice message, her voice trembling, full of tears. "Mom, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I just got so angry. I didn't think you'd really leave. Please come back, Mom. I'll change. I promise. Just come home." I listened and smiled quietly. She still didn't understand. I didn't leave because of a plane ticket. I left because I had finally realized my true worth in that family. and I was never going back to who I was before. I deleted the message and kept living my new life. A month later, I returned to the United States. The moment I stepped into the house, Richard looked at me like a drowning man spotting a life raft. His hands shook as he grabbed his phone and immediately called Sophie. "She's back. Come home right now. I told you your mom would never go through with it. If she actually signs those papers, we'll lose $50,000. Sophie showed up right away. The second she saw me, she ran forward with open arms. "Mom, you're finally home. I missed you so much." I raised a hand, stopping her in the middle of the living room. Calmly, I took the divorce papers from my bag, placed them on the table, and said coldly, "Sign them. Keep the house, the car, and the daughter. I don't want anything." The smile froze on Richard's face. His skin turned pale. "Michelle," he stammered, "how could you do this? Do you have any idea how hard I've worked all these years? You've been at home for 20 years, and now you want a divorce just because you feel left out? Is that really worth destroying our marriage?" I stood up, looked him straight in the eye, and coldly tossed the papers back on the table. "You think being a homemaker is easy? You think Sophie turned out the way she did by accident? You were the one who made me quit my job. You're the one who spent years belittling me in front of her, calling me useless because I didn't bring home a paycheck. Your parents looked down on me, and you never once defended me. Our daughter grew up hearing you call me a leech." Richard's face twisted, his voice sharp and defensive. "Oh, stop it. None of this would have happened if your mother hadn't handed you that money. It's all about the money, isn't it? Without her, you wouldn't have had the guts to do this." Sophie, who had been pretending to feel sorry, suddenly snapped, her tone furious. "You're unbelievable, Mom. Don't think that just because you've got a little money, you can treat us however you want. Have you ever even looked at yourself and how you act?" I looked her straight in the eye, my voice calm but cutting. "Sophie, I truly hope that one day you'll learn to think for yourself instead of just repeating your father's words. I spent my whole life raising you not so you could treat me like a servant." Her mouth fell open, but she couldn't say a word. I turned to both of them and said clearly, firmly, "If you don't sign, I'll take it to court. Either way, I'm ready." Then I turned, opened the door, and walked out. I didn't look back, because I knew I was no longer the woman trapped in that kitchen. I was free, and I had no intention of returning. The next morning, Richard and Sophie showed up at my mother's house, Helen's place. Later, she told me they stood there with the same faces, the same tones, only the setting had changed. Yesterday, they had played the victims in front of me. Today, they came to her house, scheming, fishing for information. Like father, like daughter, a perfect pair. Mom didn't let them in. She stood right at the door, calmly set her coffee cup on the table and said, "She's fine. She's just tired after being emotionally manipulated for too long." Sophie froze, then forced a nervous smile. "Grandma, we're just worried Mom might do something impulsive. I mean, financially." Richard quickly jumped in. "Yes, we just want to make sure the family assets are protected." My mother gave a faint smile, but it wasn't a warm one. Her voice was low and sharp. "Ah, I see. So you came here to ask what she's done with the money, didn't you?" They stammered, trying to explain, but she didn't give them the chance. "I've already spoken with the lawyer. Michelle is an adult. She has the right to make her own decisions. Stop treating her like some weak little housewife. She knows how to protect herself now legally and in life." The door didn't slam, but it closed with a cold finality. That afternoon, I sat for hours in my mother's study in Seattle. On the desk were the documents my lawyer, Joanna, had sent: trust fund structures, bank statements, financial records, I stared at them for a long time, almost in disbelief. For the first time in my life, the papers in front of me weren't ones someone had shoved toward me with a note saying, "Sign here." They were mine, and I was the one making the decisions. Mom stood by the bookshelf, holding a red teacup, her voice warm but firm. "This money was originally meant for your future to keep you safe. But it seems you need it now." She paused, looking straight at me, her once gentle eyes now marked by time, yet still bright and steady. "Your father and I realized too late that once you understand, you have to protect yourself. There's not much left to keep. But you're different, you still have a chance." A lump rose in my throat. My eyes stayed dry not because I didn't feel pain, but because it ran too deep. I picked up the pen, and for the first time, I wasn't signing Richard's insurance papers, or a loan guarantee, or any joint purchase. I signed my own name, the sole owner of the trust, and my hand didn't shake. That day, I got a lot done. I froze every joint account with Richard. For the first time in 10 years, I opened a personal account under my name only. I updated my will, removing both Richard and Sophie as beneficiaries. I emailed Joanna, my college friend and attorney, with detailed instructions on handling the divorce. I called my financial advisor and activated enhanced security verification from now on. No transaction would go through without my direct approval and signature. A week after completing the financial separation, Sophie reached out again. This time, it was a voice message. Her tone, light, cheerful, as if nothing had ever happened. "Mom, you're amazing. Traveling alone to Iceland and Norway, I saw your photos. They're beautiful. I want to hear all about it. Maybe next time we can go somewhere even farther together?" I, Michelle, 58, living in Portland, Oregon, didn't respond. A day later, another message came, her voice trembling, softer. "Mom, I'm not doing so well lately. My company just laid off a bunch of people. I've been thinking, maybe I should move back home for a while." I stayed silent. I wanted to see how long she could keep up her act of remorse. 2 days later, she sent a screenshot of her credit card statement with a message. "My card's maxed out. I really should have learned to save better. I miss you, Mom." I let out a quiet laugh. Did she miss me? Or my money? The teary apologies. The shaky voice, it was all part of the same old performance. I knew exactly what would happen next. If I wavered, even for a moment, the act would move into its next phase. And sure enough, it did. The prodigal daughter began to beg for forgiveness. I still didn't respond, but this time, I quietly installed call recording and backup software on my phone. Because I knew after the apology stage always came the manipulation stage, and I refused to be caught off guard again. On the 5th day, right on cue, she called. The moment I answered, her voice was shaky, tearful. "Mom, I can't take it anymore. I fell down the stairs today, right in front of the building. No one helped me. I was lying there all alone, and all I wanted was to call you." I didn't answer, just silence. After a few seconds, her tone shifted tense, probing. "Mom, did you change the bank password? I tried to pay the electric bill, but I can't log in." I smiled, keeping my tone calm. "Yes, I updated the security settings. The bank recommended it. There's been a lot of account fraud lately." Her voice shot up instantly. "Mom, I'm your daughter. Are you seriously protecting your account from me?" I didn't argue. My voice stayed even. "If you really want to help, send me the documents I asked for last month. But don't ever try to access my account again." She paused for a few seconds, then let out a bitter laugh. "Fine. So now I'm a stranger to you, huh?" I replied calmly. You became a stranger the day you started treating me like an ATM. I heard a loud thud. She had probably slammed her phone down on the table. Then, as if her mask had finally cracked, she screamed, "You think you're better than everyone else? That money isn't just yours. You lived off Dad's income your whole life, and now that you're divorced, you want to keep it all?" That was the raw truth. She didn't want love, she wanted money, power, and control. I pressed the record button, my voice calm but deliberate, each word clear and intentional. "Sophie, you do realize this call is being recorded, right? I'll be sending it to my legal team as evidence for the restraining order request." Silence. Then came the sound of sobbing deep, broken, from the pit of her chest. "Mom, how could you be so cruel? Don't you remember the night I had that high fever and you stayed by my bed all night? Don't you love me anymore?" I took a deep breath, my voice soft but steady. "Of course I remember. I remember that night how I didn't dare leave the room or take a sip of water, afraid that when you woke up, I wouldn't be there. I remember when you were 7 and said you'd buy me a house someday. When you were 10, you promised to take me to Hawaii. But I also remember when you grew up and told me not to come to your parent-teacher meetings because you were ashamed. You said I was useless, that I couldn't help you study, that I didn't earn money, that I didn't deserve respect." She screamed into the phone. "So you're cutting me off just because of a few things I said? You're throwing everything away?" I answered quietly, my voice cold and precise. "Not because of what you said, Sophie. I'm doing this because you turned my love into a bargaining chip. You thought affection was something you could trade. I can forgive immaturity, but I'll never again let myself be emotionally blackmailed." I hung up, went to my contacts, blocked her number on every platform, and disabled the allow re-add option, not a single goodbye. That night, I opened the refrigerator. Inside was a jar of pickles I'd made just the day before I'd planned to save it, for the day she might show up, apologize, and ask to talk. I took the jar, walked to the trash, and dropped it in. I wasn't holding on to anything anymore, not even the hope that she'd come back. The next morning, as I was making coffee in my small kitchen in Portland, the phone rang. It was Joanna, my lawyer. "Michelle," she said, her voice serious. "Richard just filed a new motion. He's requesting a share of the assets in your trust fund." She paused, then added, "He's claiming that the money your mother gave you was transferred during your marriage, so it should be considered marital property." I let out a short, sharp laugh, thin as a blade. Of course he would, and of course he'd stoop that low. But the truth was crystal clear. The money my mother sent came after I moved out, after I was legally separated from Richard. It wasn't a wedding gift, and it wasn't a joint investment. She had transferred it 2 months earlier, when she saw I was at the lowest point of my life without a single explanation, leaving only a note in the transfer description, for my daughter's life and for her own. Everything was documented: dates, receipts, bank confirmations. And now Richard wanted to twist the timeline to make it look like shared property simply because the divorce decree hadn't been finalized yet. I said nothing, just flipped through the so-called evidence his lawyer had submitted. It was unbelievable. Even the word shameless felt too mild. In his petition, he wrote, "Although the funds were transferred from the petitioner's mother-in-law, the transaction occurred during a legally recognized marriage. Therefore, both parties have theoretical access and shared entitlement to the assets." And as if to make it even more shameless, he added, "The petitioner does not object to the funds being used to support the family and for the future needs of the couple's daughter." Oh, support the family. Meaning, fund his next Find Yourself trip. Joanna and I got to work. We submitted full documentation proving the transfer date 2 weeks after I moved out. The receiving account, a completely new account solely under my name. Richard had no access to it and no prior knowledge. And most importantly, my mother's original message was still saved on my phone. Don't give him a single dime. This is the first time in your life you get to spend money on yourself. This wasn't a financial dispute anymore. Richard's true face had finally shown he wasn't afraid of losing a wife. He was afraid of losing control and money. On the day of the hearing, he showed up in a worn gray suit, the very same one he'd worn 25 years ago at our wedding. Back then, he wore it to marry me. Now, he wore it to reclaim what was never his. He stood up, trying to appear composed. I just want to clarify the matter of shared assets. We both have responsibilities toward our daughter. Joanna rose, opened the folder in her hand, and spoke with a cool, steady voice. First, this money was a personal gift from Michelle's mother, intended solely for her. Second, the transfer occurred after the parties' legal separation. Third, Richard has engaged in multiple financial misconducts, including unauthorized loans and transfers, eroding trust within the marriage. We have documented evidence. She slid the stack of proof toward the bench screenshots of the transactions. My mother's original message, and, most damningly, copies of the loan papers. Richard had once forced me to sign without reading the fine print. I could hear him breathing heavily, flustered. He hadn't expected me to keep every receipt. He hadn't imagined the same papers he shoved under my nose years ago would become evidence against him. The judge, a woman in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and composed, studied the files carefully, then looked up and said firmly, "It is evident that this money was a personal gift from Michelle's mother, transferred after the legal separation. You, sir, have no lawful claim to it." Richard fell silent. That single sentence, short but precise, sliced through his authority like a knife. Richard, I thought, don't you ever touch my money again. Outside the courthouse, Joanna and I sat on the stone steps, each holding a cup of coffee, watching Richard argue tensely with his attorney. Joanna smiled and said, "Do you know what he's most afraid of?" I turned to her. "Tell me." She took a sip of coffee and replied, "He's not afraid of losing money, Michelle. He's afraid of you. Afraid that you can spend money without asking permission." I chuckled softly. "No, Joanna," I said, my eyes lifting toward the cold Oregon sky. "What he fears most isn't the divorce itself. It's that I left and became better without him." I looked down at the paper in my hands. Across the top, the words were printed clearly: "Divorce petition officially filed." Those 5 simple words gave me a peace that all of Richard's promises never could. The day I left the Multnomah courthouse, I didn't go back to the old house. I turned instead toward the public library and filled out a volunteer application. It was a dream I had buried long ago, to help others find the books they needed, to guide, to talk, to do something that truly mattered. Years ago, Richard had scoffed. "How much could a job like that even pay? You'd be better off staying home with the kids." I'd shelved that dream for 20 years. But now, I was living for myself. And I thought, it's finally time to live the life I once dreamed of. 3 days later, I was sitting at the library's front desk, next to a wide window overlooking the park. My first visitor was an elderly woman with silver hair, asking how to print her Social Security records. I patiently guided her through using the computer, showed her how to access the government website, how to tell a real ID from a fake one, and helped her print her medication list. Before leaving, she gently took my hand and said softly, "You're more patient than my own daughter." I smiled and didn't respond. I'd heard that line before, but this time, it truly meant something. Because now, I'd earned that compliment on my own. On the way home, I stopped at a stone bench in the park near my mother Helen's house. A woman pushing a walker passed by, glanced at me, then at the lunchbox in my hands. "Eating alone?" she asked. I nodded. She smiled, her voice soft but strong. "I divorced at 60. Been living and eating alone for 20 years. And trust me, the meals get better and better." I laughed. "Weren't you scared back then?" She looked me straight in the eye, her smile steady and firm. "Of course I was. But I was more afraid of living a whole life without ever being myself." I understood. I'd been afraid too, but fear was better than living with a man who saw his wife as a personal assistant. I didn't know her name, and she didn't know my story. But in that moment, the two of us, two worn pieces of metal, sat side by side, warmed by the same sunlight. That evening, I received an email from Richard. It had only one line: "Sophie is falling apart. She says the divorce is destroying her." I didn't reply, didn't even open the attachment. I knew exactly what he was doing, planting guilt to pull me back into obedience. But I had learned one thing: not every daughter deserves forgiveness. When Richard disappeared from social media, I knew he had finally accepted defeat. What I didn't expect was that more defeats awaited him. The image of the perfect husband he had built for years began to crumble. The polite greetings at church faded away. The same people who once shook his hand now turned their backs. Social niceties are fragile. One small gust of wind, and they collapse. Then, his health began to fail. The back pain he'd ignored for years grew worse. There was no one left to remind him to eat on time, to take his medication. Eventually, he was dismissed from the financial law firm where he had worked. The official reason: personal credit issues. It turned out, all those years, he had been using my name to co-sign loans, mixing company funds with personal money. Everything only functioned smoothly as long as he wore the mask of a man with a perfect home life. Now, not even the court trusted him, let alone the board of directors. He turned to Sophie for help, but Sophie was also falling apart. After losing her job, she launched a women's empowerment and confidence coaching business. Ironically, she had never truly known what independence meant. Her ex-boyfriend got engaged just a week after breaking up with her, and Sophie broke down. She posted a tearful video online, sobbing and saying, "My mother abandoned me. She ruined my life." No one believed her. The responses split into two camps. One side commented, "Your mother didn't abandon you, she just chose herself." The other side, a few anonymous users, reposted the photo I took in Iceland under the northern lights, my coat fluttering in the wind with the caption, "This woman didn't run away, she returned to herself." I didn't answer Sophie's calls, nor did I open Richard's new emails. They no longer deserved my time. The only thing still connecting us was a shared legal account, and once the divorce was finalized, even that would be gone. I turned my story into a podcast episode and sent it to the program Women Reborn After Retirement. The host ended with these words: "This story comes from Michelle Clark, who wants to remind us, a woman isn't born to fade into the background of her family or society. She's born to shine." That episode reached more listeners than I ever expected. Hundreds of comments poured in. One person wrote, "I played this for my daughter. I didn't say anything, I just cried. Not because I was sad, but because I wanted to try too." She didn't disappear. She came home to herself. That spring, I hiked through the western forest outside Portland wearing sneakers, carrying a water bottle, chatting with the local volunteer group. Along the trail, a woman in her 60s grabbed my hand and asked, "You're Michelle, right? You really did it." I just held her hand gently and said nothing, because in that moment, I realized I was no longer the woman who once ran from her kitchen in tears, begging for freedom. I was the one who stepped out, stood tall, smiled, and became strong enough to help others take their first step too. I am Helen, Michelle's mother. The day Sophie and Richard showed up at my door, the air was bitterly cold. I stood in the doorway, watching their forced smiles and the way their eyes kept darting toward the corner where an old filing cabinet sat, filled with decades of Michelle's documents and records. They weren't there to check on her. They came looking for money, and I saw right through it. I was never naive. I remember clearly the first time Michelle brought Richard home right after they got engaged. They sat on the back porch, and I brought out a freshly baked apple pie. Michelle's eyes sparkled as she said, "Richard is so mature, responsible, and family-oriented." But I saw something else. Richard laughed a lot with Michelle, but barely smiled at me. He was polite, but cold. During dinner, he spoke about goals, ambitions, and long work hours, but never once mentioned respect. He didn't talk about what he could offer Michelle, only about how well she understood him. "Michelle is so calm," he said. "She gets me." He said it like a compliment, but I heard the subtext immediately. She's easy to control. He acted caring toward my daughter, but it was the kind of care performed for an audience. And toward me, not even a proper thank you. When dinner ended and I cleared the table, he didn't so much as glance my way. In that moment, I knew maybe he did love my daughter, but he didn't respect her, and he certainly didn't respect this family. I said nothing, because I knew choosing him was her right. My role wasn't to interfere, but to make sure that when she fell, she would still have a place to return to. A safe place to land. And that's what I had done all those years, quietly, patiently, watching my daughter learn how to become strong. I had seen Michelle swallow every disappointment, every humiliation, through those heavy, silent dinners where no one asked for her opinion and no one acknowledged her effort. I had watched my daughter live inside a version of marriage that was painfully similar to the one I once endured. And now, after all these years, I could see in her eyes the same shadow that had followed me all my life. But this time, the story would end differently. Because now, I was no longer the woman who stayed behind, cooking and washing in silence. I was the one standing at the door, guarding my daughter from those who saw her only as something to endure. When Michelle got married, I was the one who gave her the wedding dress and jewelry. She stood there, veil covering her face, crying like a child, holding my hands, and saying, "Mom, I'm going to have a beautiful life." I cried too, not because she was leaving, but because deep inside, I heard a quiet voice whisper, "She's going to suffer sooner or later." After Michelle moved in with Richard, I sometimes came over to help take care of Sophie, my little granddaughter, whom I loved like my own child. At that time, Michelle had just given birth so exhausted she could barely finish a sentence without collapsing. Richard acted polite, but his politeness carried a cold, distant air, as if I were an overstaying guest in someone else's home. I still remember one evening in their house in Seattle, when the whole family sat around the table. I said gently, "Sophie's cough would ease up if you place a warm towel on her chest before bed." Richard, my son-in-law, didn't even look up. He replied curtly, "Kids get like that sometimes. She'll be fine, no need to worry." Another time, Michelle told me she was thinking of getting a part-time job just to feel like herself again. Richard immediately cut her off, his tone full of authority. "Makes sense, her mom helps with the kid, so Michelle's not that busy anyway." He said it like a joke, but to me, those words landed like lead. I didn't react. I stayed silent because I knew exactly what I was seeing. Not a man who was simply clumsy with words, but one who was skilled at emotional manipulation. I'll never forget another night. I was washing dishes in the kitchen when Sophie, just 8 years old, then came running in, crying and begging for chocolate. I gently said, "You can have some after dinner, sweetheart." she screamed. Why do I have to listen to you? Daddy said you're just the maid. Michelle heard it. I saw her face freeze, but all she did was step forward and softly say, Mom, I'm sorry. I'll talk to her. She didn't mean it, and that was what broke my heart. Not the words of a child, but the fact that my daughter had learned to apologize for others and never for herself. She carried the guilt of everyone around her as if it were her duty. She never raised her voice at her husband, never stood up to her in-laws. She swallowed every ounce of pain, smiled through it, and treated injustice as part of her wifely duty. Richard never washed dishes, never changed a diaper, and on the rare occasions he picked up a broom, people praised him as the perfect husband. Meanwhile, Michelle became the unpaid laborer of her own home. No breaks, no pay, no gratitude. One night, I woke up to get some water and heard them arguing through the cracked bedroom door. Richard shouted, God, can you stop being so emotional? Just because your mother's here, you think you can act out? My daughter had become his emotional punching bag, and she wasn't even allowed to fight back. I stayed awake all night, terrified that by morning she would smile again and pretend nothing had happened. Those sleepless nights, I pulled out my brown leather journal and wrote. On the first page, I wrote a single line. My daughter has forgotten that she deserves love too. I wrote every day not to accuse anyone, but to remind myself that someday she would wake up. And when that day came, I would tell her, you're not crazy. You're not selfish. You've just finally woken up. And then that day came. Michelle called me. Her voice sounded completely different, no crying, no complaining. She simply said softly, Mom, I won't be coming home for Christmas. I'm going away for a while. I was silent for a few seconds, then replied, That's good, sweetheart. A trip will be good for you. I hung up, sitting alone in the living room, my hand gripping an old porcelain teacup I'd used for more than 10 years. It was cold, as if I were holding a stone. I understood the trip she mentioned wasn't a vacation. It was an escape. I had seen the true nature of Richard and Sophie long ago. That call wasn't a request for permission. It was my daughter's declaration of freedom. She was saying, Mom, I'm ready. I stayed up all night and took out a black leather notebook I kept hidden under the bed. The one where I recorded the money I'd quietly saved after selling our old family home. I used to tell myself it was an emergency fund for my old age, but now I knew I hadn't been saving it for myself. I'd been saving it for Michelle. She didn't need anyone to support her. She could earn her own way. But what she needed was a foundation, something to help her start over, something entirely her own. The next morning, I went to the bank. The clerk asked, Would you like to include a note with the transfer? I answered, calm but firm. Yes. Write this. For my daughter's life, non-refundable. In that moment, I understood all these years. I hadn't been waiting for Michelle to change. I'd been waiting for myself to stop pretending not to see, to stop being the silent mother standing on the sidelines. That night, I added another page to my old brown journal. She won't be coming home, but I know she has finally stepped onto her own path. It will be hard, but at least it's hers. I set down the pen and turned off the light. Outside, the sky was pitch black after the season's first rain, but inside, I felt peace because I knew I had given my daughter the safety net she'd never dared to ask for, but had always deserved. 3 days after Michelle left the United States, Richard and Sophie showed up at my house in Portland. The rain had just stopped, and the air still smelled of damp earth. They stood there, wearing those fake smiles too, wide, to be real. We just wanted to see how you were doing, Sophie said sweetly, placing a perfectly wrapped box of rolled cinnamon wafers on the table. Your favorite kind. I didn't touch it. I simply stepped back and opened the door for them, not out of kindness, but because I wanted to see what they were up to this time. And sure enough, as soon as the box was on the table, Richard spoke first. "We heard Michelle's been doing well. Traveling, right?" Sophie quickly chimed in, her voice bright and eager. "That's right." She posted photos under the northern lights. They were so beautiful that even my friends were jealous. I simply poured each of them a glass of water. They exchanged glances, as if silently deciding who would deliver the real message. Finally, Richard cleared his throat, sounding awkward. "We heard you sold the old house, and that Michelle received the money." I set my teacup down and looked him straight in the eye. "And who told you that?" Richard gave an uneasy laugh. "Oh, nothing serious, just something we heard. We just think maybe Michelle's under a lot of pressure managing such a large amount on her own." I cut him off, my tone calm but cold. "So what?" Sophie leaned forward, flashing a fake smile. "We just thought if we could help her invest or manage the money, it might be better. We're younger, more familiar with the market. We only want to help." I smiled, but it wasn't a warm one. It was thin, cold, and sharp, like the first layer of ice on a winter lake, clear and fragile, yet sharp enough to cut through every pretense. "You both know perfectly well that I was the one who gave that money to Michelle, don't you?" They looked at each other, visibly uneasy. "Do you think I'm some foolish old woman, someone who opens her wallet whenever she sees tears? My daughter deserves every cent of that money. She earned it by surviving years of suffering. Neither of you has the right to touch even a single penny." Richard's smile vanished. He tried to steady his voice, though his lips were twitching. "This is just a misunderstanding. We didn't." I cut him off, my tone as sharp as a blade. "There's no misunderstanding. I know exactly how you've treated my daughter with contempt, exploitation, spending her money, and still having the nerve to yell at her like a child. I heard you myself. Your mother's here, so you think you can talk back now? Did you really think I didn't hear that?" Sophie shot up from her chair, slamming her hand on the table. "You're trying to destroy our marriage. My mother never spoke ill of you." I let out a quiet, cold laugh. "Of course not. Michelle protects you, but I don't. I only protect my daughter." I walked to the door and opened it wide. "We're done talking. Don't even think about touching that money. And if you show up here again, I'll call the police. Don't mistake my age for weakness. I know exactly what I'm capable of." They froze at the doorway. Richard clenched his jaw and turned to leave first. Sophie threw me a fiery glare before following him out. I closed the door and heard the lock click a sharp, satisfying sound. I let out a long, steady breath. I had once feared that Michelle might soften again, that she'd be pulled back into their orbit because she had always been too kind, too willing to compromise. But after that meeting at the lawyer's office, I knew she had changed. She was no longer the woman who endured in silence. A few days later, I quietly attended her court hearing at the Multnomah County Courthouse. I sat in the back row, hidden behind a marble column, watching Michelle stand at the plaintiff's table in a neat navy suit. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble, even when Richard's lawyer tried to twist and distort the truth. Michelle answered every question clearly and firmly. Her voice was low but steady, her eyes unwavering. She was no longer the woman who once swallowed her tears. She was the sword, forged through years of silence. And that day, in the Multnomah courtroom, she raised that sword and freed herself. Tears filled my eyes not from sadness, but from pride. After the hearing, I sat outside on a cold metal bench, letting the spring breeze brush against my face for half an hour. I realized I hadn't been waiting for Michelle to win the case. I'd been waiting for her to win herself, to stand tall, not bow her head, and never again say, "I'm sorry," for something she didn't do. That night, I received a voice message. Michelle's voice was soft, with the sound of wind in the background. "Mom, don't worry about me anymore. I'm okay." I listened over and over, smiling even as my chest ached. The next morning, I walked to the Portland Senior Center, a place I had passed hundreds of times but never entered. I had always told myself I needed to stay home, just in case Michelle needed me. But now, I understood she didn't need a mother standing behind the curtain anymore. She had become her own safety net. It was time for me to live for myself, too. I signed up for a pottery class and joined a community memoir reading group every Wednesday afternoon. At the first session, the instructor said, "Write one sentence that describes yourself." I wrote, "The decision I'm most proud of in my life isn't giving birth to her, it's standing behind her and supporting her." After class, an older woman came up to me, lightly touched my hand, and asked, "Who is that sentence for?" I smiled. "For my daughter." She nodded, her eyes gentle. "She must be an extraordinary woman." I replied softly, a warm smile spreading across my face. "Yes, and this time, it's true." That night, I slept more deeply than I had in years. No more waking in the middle of the night. No more dreams of heavy dinners or suffocating silence. Michelle no longer needed me to intervene, and I, at last, had learned to let go. I wasn't her escape. I was the strength that pushed her forward when she needed it most. Now, she walks on her own 2 feet, and I will also return to walk into my own life. Spring has arrived. The tulips in my garden are in full bloom. I brewed a cup of mint tea and texted her a short message. "My love, I'm okay too. Don't look back. Keep walking on your own path." Michelle's story is a work of fiction, inspired by true events. The names and settings have been changed to respect privacy, but the emotions, the pain, endurance, and strength to rise again are real. After years of silence, Michelle learned that sometimes speaking up is also a way to love yourself. But if it were you, when faced with injustice in your own home, would you choose silence or would you speak up? There is no absolute right answer, only a heart brave enough to be honest with itself. And perhaps, in that moment of courage to change, we'll find the peace that God has always prepared for each of us. Thank you for watching until the end. Please stay and enjoy the 2 suggested videos at the end of the screen where stories of faith, resilience, and renewal continue to be told.